everybody, I'm Pixar T. I'm a professional astrologer, and today I'm going to be talking about Mercury retrograde through all the rising signs. If you don't know your rising sign, you can use your sun sign, but I highly recommend using your rising sign if you know it. Let's jump in. I'm going to start with the fire signs. Okay, for Aries, the Mercury retrograde is in your 11th house, and for the 11th house, this is reviewing, redoing, or reconvening with maybe old, groups, networks, acquaintances, friends, or powerful people might be involved as well. There could be some sort of issue with friends brought up from the past to be dealt with. There could be just a lot of communication with your friends from the past or with colleagues. You could be doing a really intense project with your colleagues or with your groups or networks. I would say also that being side to a powerful person could be involved in some way, maybe having to do extra work for your boss, or maybe it has to do with older people, with Saturn, ancestors possibly. It could have to do with communicating ideas that you've been considering. It could have to do with rehashing something that you feel like has been rehashed before. The Mercury retrograde is exactly square Uranus, so there could be some sort of shock or surprise or some sort of progressive or non-traditional way of making money. And I'm bringing up money because Uranus is in your second house of finances and income. So this Mercury retrograde could affect your finances or your income or the objects that you own. The second house rules your stuff. So maybe having to do with non-traditional ways of making money. Maybe something happens at work that makes you think about non-traditional ways to make money. The Mercury retrograde is also sextiling Chiron, and Chiron is currently going through your first house. It could have to do with your mentor or being a mentor to someone, helping teach someone through what you've been through yourself. So teaching and learning are a big part of it, and also healing and looking at trauma, some sort of issue, maybe with your body or with your mind or with the way that you see yourself. Okay, and then Mercury stations direct on February 4th at 24 degrees Cap. For you, that's your 10th house. So that's why work kind of gets brought into this Mercury retrograde for you. Not necessarily your career, but what you are known for doing for the people who know you. So if you're known for having a certain job, it could relate to that. If you're known for being a homemaker, it could relate to that. Just what you're known for doing is highlighted at the end of this retrograde. And the same day that Saturn Cazimi happens in your 11th house. So it kind of sounds like the end of Mercury retrograde will be some sort of resolvement. So I think I'm going to pull a card for your Mercury retrograde to give you a tip or some advice, maybe. You get the Four of Pentacles. This is the Don't Be a Miser card for me. This is you have your things and you're holding on to them. So your needs will be met, but you don't want to cling on to anything during this Mercury retrograde. Don't forget to let things go. It's pentacles, so it's material. So maybe this is speaking to the Uranus aspect. Okay. So overall for Aries, we have some sort of reviewing, revisiting, re-evaluating your friends or your groups or your colleagues, and also some sort of resolvement or some sort of redo with work or what you are known for doing as well. And it will affect something to do with your finances, your income, or your material possessions. That will be not the norm in a good way. And your material domain is on lock, so you don't need to be afraid of letting things go. And that's what I have for Aries. Please comment below. Let me know what you have planned for Mercury retrograde or what you're afraid of doing, and I can ease your fears. Although you're an Aries, so you're probably not afraid. So thank you so much for watching, and let's move on to Leo, the next fire sign. And for my Leo rising friends, that Mercury retrograde is in your 7th house. So that has to do with relationships, that has to do with your important relationships and one-on-one interactions, maybe with client work if you have clients that you work with. So there will be some sort of review, some sort of reassessment, some sort of possible redo that you have to look into with your close relationships. Maybe you're coming up with a new system or structure around your relationship and you need to review it and perfect it. Mercury retrograde is a good time to perfect things. You get a trial period with Mercury retrograde. Some sort of review or reassessment with close relationships, and it's very close to Saturn, so it could have to do with an elder, someone older than you. And so it'll be going backwards all the way back into Capricorn on February 4th, and it will pass Pluto and station direct at 24 degrees Capricorn. Your 6th house is involved as well. That's the daily grind, your daily work, also your routine, maybe your pets, also possibly illness. So take extra care of yourself during this Mercury retrograde. Don't want to be forced to take rest. And when Mercury stations retrograde, it will be exactly square Uranus and Taurus, which is your 10th house, having to do with your work, your career, or just overall what you are known for doing. That was a big sigh from Carl. He's dreaming and he's licking his chops a lot. And Uranus has been in your 10th house since 2018, making it so that what you are known for doing isn't necessarily the norm. Maybe there's a big part of you that is different than other people in your family or changing compared to other people in your life. And this Mercury retrograde can touch on that a little bit, maybe with some tension. And for Leos, Mercury rules your 11th house and your 2nd house. So this Mercury retrograde could have to do with friends, acquaintances, groups with the same goal. It could also have to do with finances and income. So the reviewing, the renewing, the reevaluating could have to do with friends or your group that you hang out with, maybe even colleagues. It also will have to do with your resources, your money, your income, and your physical material possessions. Those are themes that will come up with your Mercury retrograde because Mercury rules those topics in your chart. It will station direct February 4th in Capricorn, and on that same day, Saturn has its cazimi. So Saturn will be conjoining the Sun and having its death and rebirth. That's just interesting in general. There will be some sort of big resolvement around, I would say, around relationships, around client work or partnerships, whatever the 7th house topic is for you personally, some sort of resolvement there, because we will be having Venus retrograde done, Mercury retrograde done, and then Saturn will have its cazimi, and Saturn rules your 7th house. So there's some sort of rebirth happening with the way you do your close relationships, and maybe Mercury's coming in and helping you figure out the exact details and how to work with that. So that's what I have for my Leo risings. Thank you so much for joining me. Please comment below. Let me know what you have going on. And that's about it. I will move on to Sagittarius now. Okay, Sag risings. For you, the Mercury retrograde will be in your 3rd house and will be going back into your 2nd house. So for you, this could be reevaluating, reassessing, redoing, reprioritizing, reevaluating, thought processes, maybe just opinions that you've had or things that you've learned, noticing them and reevaluating them. Also, communications in general. Any type of spiritual work you do is also a form of communication and divination. That's relevant with your Mercury retrograde. Maybe going back and re-looking at writing you used to do. Maybe going back and looking at old conversations, old divination practices you used to do and don't touch anymore. Maybe you'll pick that back up. Communications with your siblings could come up. Going back to your old neighborhood, and also any type of travel that's like your car. Your car could need a tune-up, possibly. Doing any type of research is good for Mercury retrograde right now. You have a trial period of just reevaluating things that you've thought about before, things that you've written about, things that you've communicated. It retrogrades back into your second house, which is your finances and your income and your material, physical possessions. So you could be reevaluating how you're making money. You could be budgeting, reprioritizing. It's a really good time to purge old things, letting things go that you don't need anymore, donating things. And this Mercury retrograde will be squaring Uranus in Taurus. So there could be some sort of tension, some sort of pressure around your daily routine. Maybe realizing that you need to revamp your routine. Maybe having to take your pet in for a checkup, or just a check-in. Just re-checking in with your pets. Also just daily work in general and coworkers. Maybe you see old coworkers. And this Mercury retrograde is sextiling Chiron in Aries. There's just something about this Mercury retrograde that might heal something in you around fun, around pleasure, enjoyment, dating, and sex. There could be something that comes up with this Mercury retrograde that helps heal a wound there, and also could introduce you to a mentor or a teacher. Chiron has to do with teaching and learning a lot of the time as well. So you could come into some sort of teaching or student position. So that's something to look out for too. And Mercury will station direct on February 4th at 24 degrees Capricorn, and that's conjoined Pluto. So we're talking about Pluto again. So that's dark things, that's secrets, that's hidden things, it's control, power dynamics, intensity in general. And the same day Mercury stations direct, Saturn has its cazimi in your third house. So there's some sort of death and rebirth happening with the way you've been thinking about something, or with the way that you communicate something, maybe having to do with your car, having to do with your siblings, having to do with teaching or learning in some capacity. So some sort of rebirth to look forward to after the end of this Mercury retrograde. So that's what I have for Sagittarius. Please let me know how it goes. And I'm going to move on to Earth signs. Okay, Taurus risings. For you, Mercury retrograde will be in your 10th house, which has to do with what you are known for doing or your job. So there could be some finalizing of details on a project that needs to get done for this coming 3 weeks. It goes back into your 9th house, which has to do with your higher mind and your ideals and your spirituality. So there may be something happening for you in terms of your work. Mercury's coming through, helping with the details, and goes back into the 9th house to remind you a bit about your spirituality and why you are doing what you are doing. So for you, Mercury rules your 2nd house and your 5th house. So this review could have to do with money or your income or your material possessions. Also your 5th house, so having to do with what you do for fun. This Mercury retrograde is also sextiling Chiron. There is some sort of healing going on, some sort of emotional and mental wound that is being worked on in the background while you work on all these other details. Maybe reconnecting with a mentor or a mentee. Chiron a lot of the time has to do with teaching and learning as well. So, Taurus rising, overall, there'll be a lot of review and detail work with work and with being reminded about your spirituality, along with your income and your identity, and reviewing pleasure and what you do for fun. So that's what I have for my Tauruses. I'm going to go ahead and pull a card, or show you the card I pulled for Tauruses. The Queen of Pentacles. There's your Taurus. So you have what you need materially, whether or not it feels like it. You are taken care of, and you are in the position to help or not help people. And maybe this has to do with work or overall with your boundaries, but the Queen of Pentacles is known for her power to assist or her power to withhold assistance. So just keep that in mind during this Mercury retrograde. And that's what I have for my Taurus risings. So please comment below. Let me know what happens. Let me know what goes on. And I'm going to move on to the next Earth sign. Okay, Virgo risings. The Mercury retrograde is in your 6th house of daily work, your routine, your pets, your health or illness as well. Mercury retrograde is conjoining Saturn, so there is a very serious or restrictive aspect to this Mercury retrograde. It's squaring Uranus. There's also some sort of untraditional or out of the box idea coming forth with this Mercury retrograde. Mercury for you rules your 1st house and your 10th house. So this Mercury retrograde affects Virgo a lot more than the rest of the signs. So there will be extra rest needed for you during this Mercury retrograde. Even if you seem too busy for it, you need to rest extra. You will be feeling this in your body, as well as either your career, your job, or just what you're known for doing overall. There'll be some sort of review or reevaluation of your routine, of your day-to-day activities, maybe with your coworkers, maybe with your pets, and maybe with your health as well. It will affect your body and the way that you see yourself. You may need extra rest. You'll be reevaluating and rethinking a lot of things having to do with your body, having to do with your career and what you're known for doing. Maybe you're kicking around new ideas of what to do with your life. Maybe you're kicking around new ideas of a new routine or trying new things overall. I like to say that Mercury retrograde is a good time to try something new. It's a good trial time. You have about 3 weeks to get it dialed in, whatever it is you're trying new. And then you can decide when Mercury stations direct if you want to implement it for good. And Mercury stations direct on February 4th at 24 degrees Capricorn. And it'll be conjoined Pluto, so whatever is resolved, there will be some sort of resolvement with with the Venus retrograde and the Mercury retrograde ending around the same week. Also, there is a Saturn cazimi as well in Aquarius. So, by the end of this Mercury retrograde, a lot of details will be ironed out, having to do with relationships as well, with your Venus retrograde being over, and also maybe just new systems and structures in your life. Maybe a new foundation was laid and you're going to be able to move forward with that after this Mercury retrograde. So that's what I have for my Virgos. Please let me know what you're afraid of. Let me know what's going to be happening for you for these next couple weeks. And maybe I can ease your worry about Mercury retrograde. And now I'm going to move on to Capricorn. Okay, Cap risings. For you, this Mercury retrograde is going to be in your 2nd house and moving back into your 1st house. So there'll be some sort of review, redo, or reprioritization around your finances, your income, and your physical material possessions. Maybe you get a new piece of information that allows you to change things up for your income or your finances. It's also a really good time to let things go. Mercury retrograde in your 2nd house, you can let go of old things, donate old things. It'll be retrograding back into your 1st house and conjoining Pluto at 24 degrees. So there is some sort of realization or catharsis that may happen at the end of this cycle. For you, Mercury rules your 6th house and your 9th house. So there will also be some sort of review or redo around your daily routine, your day-to-day activities, maybe also having to do with work or your coworkers, just hard work that you do that you don't necessarily get to be the face of or get the credit for. As well as your 9th house, which has to do with your higher mind, your spirituality, your religion, or maybe schooling. But overall, maybe some sort of higher ideal or connection you have with the higher mind that's getting a review as well. Maybe you're revisiting old modalities that you used to use, like maybe you're revisiting your tarot deck, or you're revisiting looking into astrology, or you're revisiting yoga. All these higher mind 9th house topics, revisiting school, relearning something, or going to school for something you've been considering a long time. This Mercury retrograde squares Uranus, so there could be some sort of shock or surprise for you as well involved with this, maybe regarding someone you're dating, maybe regarding your children, or even just enjoyment in general. And so Mercury stations direct on February 4th at 24 degrees Cap with Pluto, as I said earlier. So some sort of completion after this Venus retrograde, after this Mercury retrograde. A lot has been being reviewed for the past 2 months. A lot has been on trial, I should say. And Mercury stationing direct will be the completion. The same day is a Saturn Cazimi, and this is important for Saturn rising like Capricorn and Aquarius. This is your ruling planet, so it will be going through its death and rebirth the day Mercury stations direct. So there could be some important information that's learned at the end of this cycle that initiates some sort of renewal for you. So it's a big Mercury retrograde, and we are all excited for it. Please let me know what you have planned. Let me know what your thoughts are on this Mercury retrograde. I would love to hear from you. And I will move on to the air signs. Okay, Gemini risings. For you, the Mercury retrograde will be in your 9th house. So there will be reviewing, redoing, and reevaluating things to do with your higher mind, your spirituality, and the modalities or tools you use with your spirituality or religion. It could also have to do with higher mind learning, like education or a trade, learning a trade of some kind. Mercury for you rules your 1st house and your 4th house. So when Mercury is retrograde as a Gemini rising, you will feel this more intensely than most of the signs. You'll probably feel a little bit more tired than usual. You may need more rest than usual. Your ruling planet is going backwards. So maybe even for you, things could feel backwards. There could be some sort of review that goes on with your identity and how you see yourself, maybe having to do with changing your appearance in some way, or the way that you think about yourself or feel about yourself, some sort of shift there. It also rules your 4th house of your foundation. So this could include your family. There could be some kind of review or redo or going back with your family or your foundation, like the family you create for yourself. On February 4th, Mercury stations direct, conjoining Pluto. So after this Mercury retrograde, there is some sort of completion that occurs having to do with Venus retrograde, your relationships, or whatever Venus retrograde has been for you. Some sort of completion there. And it may be intense. There may be some sort of extreme that comes up with Pluto. Pluto rules dark stuff. It rules addiction. It rules the stuff we don't want to look at and get forced to look at, deeply buried within. So that will be brought up with Mercury stationing direct, but it will be the result of something having been completed, most likely. So that's what I have for my Gemini risings. Thank you so much for listening. Please comment below, like, subscribe. Let me know how this goes for you or what you're concerned with. I would love to hear from you. And let's move on to the next air sign, Libra. Okay, Libra risings. For you, this Mercury retrograde will be in your 5th and 4th houses. With Mercury retrograde in your 5th house, there could be some sort of review or redo around pleasure for you. So you could be looking at the way that you're partying, the way that you're playing games, who you're dating could come up as well. Some sort of review. Maybe exes come back from the past. I'm hoping not. Maybe you're remembering old hobbies you used to have and taking them up, or taking up hobbies that you've been considering doing for a long time and haven't pulled the trigger yet. This Mercury retrograde is a good trial period to try new hobbies, new people, new ways of pleasure. And it will retrograde back into your 4th house. So whatever you're learning and trying also goes back to integrating it with your foundation. That could be with your family. That could be with your created family. But overall, there's some sort of review that's happening with how you do pleasure and how you bring that home to your foundation. Mercury for you rules your 9th and 12th house. So reevaluating, reconsidering ideals that you have. Self-care is also highlighted with this Mercury retrograde for you. Mercury retrograde requires a lot of self-care for my Libra risings. With it ruling your 12th house, it's important to slow down and to smell the roses and to just be mindful. And Mercury will station direct on February 4th and will conjoin Pluto when it stations. So there's some sort of completion that will feel like happened. But also, when Mercury stations direct with Pluto, there could be some darker or yuckier stuff that you don't want to look at coming up, stuff that we normally push down. Maybe after all that trial, there is a realization or a moment of catharsis. There's some sort of tension, though, once Mercury stations direct. It will conjoin Pluto in your 4th house, so some sort of emergence of something you didn't want to look at being held out on a platter for you to look at. And you will have done all of this work during Mercury retrograde, so you will be ready for it. It will feel so good to have all of that done. Once Mercury stations direct, we will be done with Venus retrograde, we'll be done with Mercury retrograde, and Saturn will be having its cazimi the same day that Mercury stations direct. So the planet that rules your home and your family and your foundation, as well as joy and pleasure, there'll be some sort of renewal there, some sort of death and rebirth. So that's what I have for my Libra risings. Thank you so much for being here. Please comment below. Let me know what's going on for you. Let me know what you have planned, what you're afraid of, and I would love to hear from you. And now I'll move on to Aquarius rising. Okay, for my Aquarius risings, Mercury retrograde will be beginning in your 1st house, conjoining Saturn. So this will be a very visceral Mercury retrograde for you, especially if your ascendant is at the early degrees of Aquarius. So, what is a Mercury retrograde in the 1st house? There's some sort of review, redo, or re-looking at old stuff to do with your identity, your body, how you see the world, how you view the world. There's some sort of review of the ideas that you live your life by. There's some sort of review in the way you look, in the way that you act. This is a real inner work transit for my Aquarius risings. Mercury for you rules your 5th house and your 8th house. So while Mercury is reviewing and redoing and reevaluating stuff to do with your identity and how you look and how you view the world, it also affects your pleasure and your enjoyment. It also affects your anxiety and your fears. So some of those themes could also be coming up for you during this Mercury retrograde. It will be retrograding all the way back into your 12th house to 24 degrees Capricorn, where it will conjoin Pluto when it stations direct. And so for you, this is in your 12th house, and the 12th house is kind of hard to see. It's hard to predict for the native. It's hard for you to know exactly what's coming. The 12th house represents the stuff we can't see. So when Mercury stations direct, there will be some sort of completion. It will conjoin Pluto, so there may be some sort of surprise intensity or extremeness that comes up when Mercury stations direct on February 4th. At the point that Mercury stations direct, you'll probably be feeling the need for a bit more rest after all of that Mercury retrograde stuff in your 1st house, all of that review, looking at yourself a lot, thinking inner work type stuff. When it moves back into the 12th house, you're going to want more alone time, and you're going to want more rest to deal with whatever came up for you during that Mercury retrograde. So it's a good couple weeks for you to just take it easy. Don't do too much. Maybe do a lot of journaling, a lot of self-care. Take advantage of this Mercury retrograde in your 1st house. Also, anything to do with the 1st house may have to do with the 7th. So this could have to do with a relationship for you as well. Some sort of review, looking at the details, reevaluating, and resetting something of some kind. And so I think that's it for Aquarius risings. Please comment below. Let me know what you have planned. Let me know what's going on. What are you afraid of? I would love to hear from you. And I will move on to water signs. For my Cancer risings, Mercury retrograde will be in your 8th house and moving back into your 7th house. So there's a lot of stuff around partnership I'm feeling coming up for you for this Mercury retrograde. So there's a lot of reviewing, redoing, reevaluating around shared resources that you have. That could be with a partner, that could be with a roommate, it could be with friends, it could be definitely with family, sharing resources. There's some sort of reevaluation going on there. Also having to do with your deepest, darkest fears and anxieties. They're not going to happen, but they are going to be brought out for you to look at and to reevaluate. Mercury retrograde moves back into your 7th house before it stations direct. Mercury was stationed direct on February 4th at 24 degrees Capricorn, so the late degrees of Capricorn. After all that hard work that you put in with Mercury going retrograde, Mercury pulling out all this stuff for you to look at that you didn't want to look at, it will station direct in your 7th house of partnership. And so maybe some stuff with your partner will come out. It'll conjoin Pluto. So Pluto is having us look at things that we really didn't want to look at, stuff from the underbelly of our life. And Pluto may make this retrograde station feel a bit more intense. There could be some sort of catharsis. This Mercury retrograde for you may be a little bit more challenging, but it's nothing you can't handle, especially if you are focusing on self-care and self-betterment. The other thing about the 8th house is that sometimes it doesn't have to do with you, with shared resources. It may not be your self-improvement. It may have to do with your partner, the person you share your resources with. The Mercury retrograde may have a lot to do with their life and you having to support them in that. It could feel a little bit scary at times, but just remember to use your tools that you have for self-care to keep yourself grounded. So that's what I have for my Cancer risings. Thank you so much for joining me. And let's move on to Scorpio risings. So for my Scorpio risings, there will be a Mercury retrograde in your 4th house. So there will be some sort of review, redo, or reassessment around your foundation, around your family life, around your home life. For you, Mercury rules your 8th house and your 11th house. So this retrograde could bring up your deepest fears and anxieties, not in the way that they will happen, but in the way that they are brought out for you to look at and to heal or to reassess. Also, this could have to do with your partner and their life, or who you share your resources with, and them going through some sort of reevaluation process. Also, your 11th house, having to do with your friends, your groups, your acquaintances, maybe old friends coming back from the past. This Mercury retrograde is exactly square Uranus, so there could be some sort of progressive, non-traditional, or out-of-the-box element to this Mercury retrograde that might shock people, surprise people, or just be overall unique in general. And then Mercury will station direct on February 4th in your 3rd house at 24 degrees Capricorn. And it will be closely conjoined Pluto. So when Mercury stations direct, there's some sort of completion occurring. It's after the Venus retrograde, it's after the Mercury retrograde, and Saturn will be Cazimi that same day in your 4th house. So some sort of completion of a lot of the stuff that you've been learning in the past month or so while all these planets were retrograde. But Pluto being involved will bring up some sort of dark stuff, maybe a power dynamic, a control dynamic. Maybe it's just something really extreme, some sort of extreme or intensity that's brought up, or just something you really didn't want to look at originally. But this is Pluto, so make sure that you're not avoiding anything and that whatever comes up, you work with it, because if you don't, Pluto will blow it up for you and make it a lot bigger than it needed to be if you looked at it originally. Also, this Mercury retrograde is squaring Uranus in your 7th house, so this could have to do with a partnership. This could have to do with client work. Something is being shook up, though, with your one-on-one interactions. There's a shakeup, there's something new happening, something surprising, possibly something unique. Also having to do with freedom. There could be something to do with freedom and independence and autonomy. So that's what I have for my Scorpio risings. Please comment below. Let me know what you have planned. I would love to hear from you. And now I will move on to Pisces. Okay, Pisces rising. Mercury retrograde for you will begin in the 12th house. So it'll feel kind of confusing when Mercury stations retrograde. You won't know exactly what's going on or exactly what it's doing. It's conjoining Saturn, so there's some sort of isolation or restriction involved with this Mercury retrograde. You may want more alone time than usual when Mercury stations retrograde. It's a really good time to go to therapy or to do inner work, do a lot of journaling, a lot of self-care focus, because when Mercury's in the 12th house, stuff's going on behind the scenes that we can't see or make sense of yet. But if you're working with somebody else, if you're trying to be self-aware, if you're journaling and working on yourself, then it won't be as difficult. And for you, this Mercury retrograde is squaring Uranus in the 3rd house. So this could have to do with taking drives, had to do with your car, possibly, having to do with communication and the way that you're thinking about something. That's why I'm saying you should maybe journal or talk to somebody during this Mercury retrograde to help you sort through some things. Mercury being retrograde at this point is a good time for you to take the initiative to do this and to work on yourself and to do the inner work. For you, Mercury rules the 4th house and the 7th house. So this Mercury retrograde could also have to do with your foundation, your home life, your family life, reevaluating, reconsidering. Mercury also rules your 7th house of relationships. So this Mercury retrograde could also have to do with your partnerships, either with a romantic partner or with a business partner. Also, just close one-on-one interactions in general. So your best friend could be involved, or maybe even client work if you're doing one-on-one client work. Some sort of review, redo, reevaluation, looking at the old ways you did stuff having to do with your home life or having to do with your relationships, and maybe having a trial period, trying new things. And a lot of this Mercury retrograde will be kind of confusing, possibly, for you. And that's why I think talking to somebody or journaling or self-care in some way will help you navigate what it is that this Mercury retrograde is trying to teach you. By February 4th, when Mercury is back into Capricorn, it will station direct at 24 degrees, and this will be in your 11th house of acquaintances, friends, groups, networks, colleagues. Could be involved in some way. Maybe you start going to a psychic group. Maybe, I don't know. There's some sort of group thing going on for you at the beginning of February. Maybe friends, or maybe it has to do with work. But whatever it is, I feel like at the beginning of February, you will know a lot more about what has been going on in the past month in January. You aren't going to be given enough information probably until February, when it all clicks together and everything starts making sense. And maybe it was with the assistance of friends or colleagues or a group of some kind. But the one thing to watch out for is Mercury stationing direct with Pluto. So Pluto's there, being intense, bringing the extremes. So we need to be aware of the Pluto stuff that could come up. And Pluto brings up dark stuff, power dynamics, the stuff we don't want to look at a lot of the time. And so after this Mercury retrograde, there will be some sort of completion, and it may be kind of intense. But overall, it will start to click, it will start to make sense, it'll feel pretty deep probably for you with Pluto being there, and it may involve friends or a group of some kind. So I think that's everything for my Pisces risings. So please comment below. Let me know what you have planned, what's going on for you. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you as my favorite sign. And thank you very much. And I guess that's it for everybody. That's everybody's sign for Mercury retrograde. So if you're here watching the outro for some reason, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this video, or subscribe if you haven't already. and I will see you next time. Bye.